The shipyard above Mars hummed with activity. Hundreds of construction drones floated around the massive vessel, putting final touches on what would become humanity's greatest achievement. Captain Daewon Kim stood at the observation deck, watching his ship take shape. The KRS Taegukgi stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull gleaming under the artificial lights. Behind him, Admiral Hyejin Park reviewed the guest list one more time. Representatives from 47 alien civilizations would arrive within hours for the official unveiling ceremony. She had fought hard to make this day happen, navigating through endless political debates and budget concerns. Now humanity would finally show the galaxy what they could build. "Are you nervous?" the Admiral asked. Daewon shook his head slowly. "Not nervous, curious. We're about to find out if we've built a guardian or created a problem." The Admiral smiled. "Sometimes they're the same thing." The ceremony hall filled quickly. Aliens of every imaginable shape and size took their seats. There were crystalline beings that shimmered in the light, insectoids with dozens of clicking mandibles, and reptilian creatures with scales that changed colors. The Galactic Council had mandated that every member species contribute a flagship vessel to the new Unified Defense Initiative. Most civilizations had submitted standard military ships, nothing remarkable. Humanity was the newest member of the galactic community, having joined only 30 years ago after finally achieving faster-than-light travel. Commander Thax of the Kryn Empire sat in the front row, his reptilian features arranged in what might have been a smirk. The Kryn were the galaxy's premier military power, and Thax had made it clear he expected humanity's contribution to be adequate but forgettable. Humans were newcomers, after all. What could they possibly build that would impress civilizations with 50,000 years of spacefaring experience? The lights dimmed. Daewon stepped onto the stage, his uniform crisp and his expression calm. The holographic display behind him showed the Taegukgi in full detail. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "Humanity is honored to present our contribution to galactic defense. The KRS Taegukgi represents our commitment to peace and our dedication to protecting all civilized worlds." Polite applause rippled through the audience. The ship looked impressive enough, though not unprecedented in size. Several alien representatives whispered to each other, their translations devices buzzing quietly. Now I'll turn the presentation over to our Chief Weapons Engineer, Dr. Sang-Woo Choi, who will explain the technical specifications. Dr. Choi bounded onto the stage with the enthusiasm of someone who had just consumed 6 cups of coffee. His hair stuck up at odd angles and he clutched a data tablet like it was a precious artifact. He immediately began talking, his words tumbling out rapidly. "The Taegukgi features 8 mass driver cannons capable of accelerating projectiles to 0.3 light speed," he announced cheerfully. The room went quiet. An alien scientist in the third row raised a crystalline appendage. "Did you say 0.3 light speed?" "Yes, 30% of light speed. We solved the targeting problem by using predictive algorithms that account for relativistic effects. The power requirements were tricky, but we built 3 fusion reactors instead of 1, so most military vessels can barely achieve 0.05 light speed," the scientist interrupted. "The energy requirements alone would—" "Oh, we fixed that too," Dr. Choi beamed. Moving on to the missile systems. Each launch bay can deploy 10,000 independently targeting missiles per salvo. The AI guidance system allows each missile to adapt its strategy based on what the previous missiles learned before being destroyed. "It's really quite elegant." Commander Thax stood up abruptly. 10,000 missiles? Per salvo? Per launch bay, Dr. Choi corrected. "We have 6 launch bays, so 60,000 missiles total if we fire everything at once, though I wouldn't recommend that unless you really dislike someone." The Kryn commander's scales shifted from green to a dark purple. "This is a joke, yes? Some kind of human humor?" Daewon stepped forward. "I assure you, Commander, this is not a joke." "Dr. Choi, perhaps you should continue." The scientist nodded enthusiastically. Right. Now the really interesting part is the nuclear torpedo system. Most civilizations abandoned nuclear weapons millennia ago because they thought they were primitive. But we refined the design, miniaturized the warheads, and mounted them on FTL-capable torpedoes that can phase through energy shields. They detonate inside the target ship. Very effective. An insectoid being named Alara stood up, her mandibles clicking nervously. "You're describing weapons that could destroy entire fleets. This single ship could potentially—" She paused, calculating. "A full salvo could sterilize a moon." Only a small moon, Dr. Choi said helpfully. For anything bigger, you'd need multiple salvos. The room erupted. Aliens began shouting in dozens of languages. Translation devices struggled to keep up. Ambassador Yoon Seo-han, sitting in the diplomatic section, closed her eyes and took a deep breath. This was going exactly as badly as she had feared. High Arbiter Velshon, leader of the Galactic Council, rose from his seat. His crystalline body refracted the light into rainbow patterns. When he spoke, his voice carried a resonance that silenced the crowd. Captain Kim, am I to understand that humanity has built what amounts to a weapon of mass extinction and labeled it a defensive vessel? Daewon met the Arbiter's gaze steadily. With respect, High Arbiter, we built a deterrent. The Teguki is designed to make conflict so costly that no rational actor would initiate one. We studied our own history extensively before designing this ship. We learned that the best way to prevent war is to make the price of aggression unthinkable. You learned to threaten annihilation, Commander Thax growled. There's a difference between defense and intimidation, is there? Daewon asked quietly. When someone knows they cannot win, they choose not to fight. We're not threatening anyone. We're simply ensuring that humanity will not be an easy target. Ilara spoke up again, her voice thoughtful. You said you built 6 of these ships? The Teguki is the first, Admiral Park confirmed, stepping onto the stage. 5 more are under construction. They will be completed within 2 years. The High Arbiter's crystalline features somehow managed to convey deep concern. I am calling an emergency session of the Galactic Council. Captain Kim, you are summoned to testify regarding potential violations of the Praxis Accords. These weapons may constitute crimes against galactic law. Daewon nodded slowly. I will attend, High Arbiter. Though I would point out that we haven't violated any laws. We simply built something more effective than expected. As the aliens filed out of the ceremony hall, many casting nervous glances at the holographic display of the Teguki, Commander Ji-Won Lee approached her captain. She was young for her rank, barely 29, but her tactical mind was sharp. Captain, they're terrified of us now, she said quietly. Yes. Is that what we wanted? Daewon looked at his tactical officer. Fear and respect often look the same from a distance. We'll find out which one we've earned. Later that evening, Daewon stood alone in the shuttle bay, preparing to travel to the council station. Ambassador Han joined him, her expression troubled. They're going to try to force us to dismantle the ship, she said. Probably. What will you tell them? He smiled grimly. The truth. That humanity spent 10,000 years learning how to destroy itself, and we got very, very good at it. Now we're in a galaxy full of civilizations that never had to learn those lessons. They think we're monsters. Maybe they're right. But we're monsters who know exactly how dangerous monsters can be. The shuttle lifted off, carrying Daewon toward whatever judgment awaited. Behind him, the Teguki hung in space like a silent promise, or a threat, depending on your perspective. The Teguki dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kryn border expanse. On the main view screen, the battle was already visible. Dozens of ships exchanged fire amid 3 massive asteroid fields that created natural choke points in space. The Kryn defensive fleet, once numbering over 200 vessels, was reduced to scattered groups fighting desperately against an enemy that seemed to adapt to every tactic they tried. The Voidborn ships were unlike anything in the galactic database. They looked organic, almost alive, with hulls that seemed to pulse and writhe. Weapons grew from their surfaces like tumors, firing strange bioweapons that ate through conventional shields and armor. Analysis, Daewon ordered from his command chair. Commander Ji-Won Lee studied her tactical display. 300 hostile vessels confirmed. They're using some kind of adaptive shielding. The Kryn weapons are becoming less effective with each hit. It's like the enemy ships are learning. Biological technology, Dr. Choi muttered from his engineering station. He had insisted on being present for the first real combat test. They're not adapting strategically. They're evolving, literally. How long until they adapt to our weapons? Daewon asked. Unknown, but I suggest we don't give them time to learn. Daewon nodded. Tactical, transmit our presence to the Kryn fleet. Let them know we're here. Then target the largest Voidborn capital ship. Single mass drive around. I want to see how they react. The weapon charged. On the view screen, a slug of depleted uranium accelerated down the barrel of the massive cannon, pushed by electromagnetic fields that ramped its velocity to 30% of light speed. At that speed, the projectile itself became a relativistic weapon, Mass and velocity combined into something that no shield technology in the galaxy could fully stop. The round crossed the distance in seconds. The Voidborn capital ship's shields flared, trying to deflect the impact. They might as well have tried to stop a meteor with tissue paper. The projectile punched through the shields, through the hull, and continued out the other side. The ship didn't just explode. It vaporized. The kinetic energy was so extreme that matter simply ceased to exist in any recognizable form. The projectile kept going, its momentum barely reduced. It struck a second Voidborn vessel, then a third. By the time the round finally exhausted its energy, 4 enemy ships had been destroyed by a single shot. The bridge of the Taiguchi was silent for a moment. Commander Jiwan Lee spoke first, her voice quiet. "We just killed thousands of beings with one bullet." "Yes," Daewon said. "And there are still 296 more ships to deal with." "Tactical, how is the Voidborn fleet responding?" "They're changing formation. 60 vessels breaking off from the main attack to intercept us. They recognize a threat." "Good. Pull them away from the Kryn survivors. Helm, position us at the edge of that asteroid field. Use it for cover if needed. Weapons, prepare a full missile salvo." The weapons officer hesitated. "Sir, a full salvo is 10,000 missiles." "I'm aware." "Launch them." The launch bays opened. Missiles streamed out in waves, each one a smart weapon with adaptive artificial intelligence. The first wave struck the Voidborn formation and was mostly destroyed by defensive fire. But each missile that died transmitted data back to the missiles behind it. The second wave adjusted its approach. The third wave was even more effective. By the time the 10th wave arrived, the missiles were predicting Voidborn defensive patterns before they happened. Voidborn ships exploded in rapid succession. Their organic hulls ruptured, spilling atmosphere and debris into the vacuum. In 4 minutes, 30 enemy vessels were gone. The remaining 30 broke off their attack, retreating toward the main fleet. "They are learning fast," Dr. Choi observed. "They adapted to our missile patterns in real time. Next time they'll be ready." "Then we won't use missiles next time," Daewon said. "Tactical status of the main Voidborn fleet?" "Regrouping behind the largest asteroid cluster." "Wait, contact. Multiple contacts. They're launching boarding pods." "Boarding pods? They're trying to board us?" "Confirmed. 100 small craft heading our way. They're fast." Daewon almost smiled. "They want to know how we work. They're curious. That's a weakness. Let them come. Activate hull defense protocols." The boarding pods attached to the Taiguchi's hull like parasites. Biomechanical creatures emerged, carrying tools that began cutting through the outer armor. They were designed to breach a ship's hull and inject assault troops directly into the interior. They never got the chance. The moment they breached the outer layer, automated systems activated. The hull plating became electrified, sending massive voltage through anything touching it. Point defense turrets emerged from hidden compartments, targeting the boarding creatures at point-blank range. Sections of the hull that were compromised sealed themselves off and vented to space. The boarding attempt lasted less than 3 minutes. Every Voidborn creature was dead, every boarding pod destroyed. "Hull breach contained," the damage control officer reported. "Minimal casualties. 2 crew members injured, none dead." Commander Jiwan Lee studied the tactical display. "The main fleet is repositioning. They're gathering behind that large asteroid cluster. I think they're preparing for a coordinated assault." "How many ships in that cluster?" "Approximately 180. Wait. New contact emerging from behind the asteroids. It's massive. Twice our size, at least." The Voidborn dreadnought appeared on the view screen. It dwarfed every other ship in the battle. Its hull pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, and weapons ports opened across its surface like 1,000 eyes. "That's their command ship," Dr. Choi said. "Has to be. If we take that out, the rest might retreat. It's protected by asteroids and a defensive screen of smaller ships," Jiwan pointed out. "Mass drivers won't work. Too much debris in the way. Missiles would be intercepted." Daewon considered their options. Then he made his decision. "Prepare the Stellar Lance." The bridge crew turned to look at him. Even Dr. Choi looked concerned. "Captain, we've never test-fired that weapon outside of controlled conditions. The power requirements alone could. That's why we built 3 fusion reactors. This is exactly the situation the Stellar Lance was designed for. A target too important to miss, too defended to reach with conventional weapons. Charge the weapon." The ship's reactors ramped up to maximum output. Energy flowed through crystal focusing arrays that lined a channel running the length of the ship. The stellar lance was essentially a directed energy weapon that focused concentrated solar radiation into a coherent beam. It was the kind of technology most civilizations had abandoned 20,000 years ago because it was too inefficient, too dangerous, and too difficult to aim. Humans had solved all three problems. Weapon charged, the tactical officer reported. Targeting solution locked on the Voidborn command ship. Fire, the stellar lance activated. A beam of concentrated energy lanced out from the Taiguki's bow. It burned through the asteroid field, vaporizing rock and ice. It punched through the defensive screen of smaller ships like they weren't there. And it struck the Voidborn dreadnought directly amidships. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the massive ship split in half. The beam had burned completely through it, bisecting the vessel with surgical precision. Secondary explosions rippled along both halves as internal systems failed. The two pieces drifted apart, dead in space. The remaining Voidborn fleet hesitated. For the first time since the battle began, they stopped advancing. They had encountered an enemy they couldn't adapt to, couldn't overwhelm, couldn't understand. Their command ship was gone. Their tactical advantage was gone. They fled. 160 ships broke formation and retreated at maximum speed, leaving the system entirely. The battle was over. Daewon sat back in his command chair. The bridge was silent except for the hum of electronics and the quiet breathing of his crew. They had just destroyed or driven off 300 enemy ships. The Kryn defensive fleet had been saved. And they had done it with one ship. Commander Ji-Won Lee's voice was quiet. "Captain, the Kryn fleet commander is hailing us. Put him through." Commander Thax appeared on the screen. His scales were pale, his expression unreadable. "Captain Kim, you saved us. My people owe you a debt we can never repay. We did what needed to be done, Commander. How are your casualties?" "Heavy. We lost over 100 ships before you arrived. Thousands of lives. But it would have been all of us if you hadn't intervened." Thax paused. "I was wrong about your species. And your ship. I see that now." "You weren't wrong to be concerned," Daewon replied. "You were right to question us. To demand accountability. That's what keeps weapons like this in check." After the connection closed, Dr. Choi approached the command chair. "Captain, we only used about 15% of our total firepower. The galaxy just saw what we can do when we hold back. Imagine if they saw what we could do at full capacity." "They won't," Daewon said firmly. "This battle stays classified. Maximum security. The Council needs to know what happened, but the specific details of our capabilities remain secret." "Why?" Ji-Won asked. "We just proved that Taiguki works. We saved lives. Because once you prove you can win any fight, every conflict becomes a fight to the death. We just raised the stakes for everyone in the galaxy. Now we have to live with that." An incoming transmission interrupted. The Grand Chamber looked different now. The same circular tiers, the same holographic stars overhead, but the atmosphere had changed completely. 3 weeks had passed since the Voidborn battle. 3 weeks of constant negotiation, debate, and political maneuvering. The galaxy had seen what the Taiguki could do, and everyone had an opinion about it. Daewon stood at the center platform again, but this time he wasn't alone. Admiral Hyojin Park stood beside him, having traveled from Earth specifically for this session. Ambassador Yoon Seo-han occupied the diplomatic section, ready to intervene if needed. The stakes had never been higher. High Arbiter Velshan called the session to order. "The Council has deliberated extensively on the matter of humanity's super dreadnought-class vessels. We have reviewed the battle data from the Kryn border. We have consulted military experts from 50 civilizations. And we have reached a decision." The chamber fell silent. This was it. Either humanity would be allowed to keep their ships, or they would face sanctions that could cripple their position in galactic society. "However," the High Arbiter continued, "before we announce our decision, several representatives have requested to speak. Commander Thax of the Kryn Empire." Thax stood, his scales now a steady blue that indicated calm contemplation. 3 weeks ago I called for these ships to be banned. I believed they represented an existential threat to galactic peace. I was wrong. Not about the threat, but about the solution. He looked directly at Daewon. "The Taiguki saved my people. Captain Kim and his crew had every opportunity to demonstrate their full destructive capability. They could have annihilated the Voidborn fleet completely. Instead, they forced a retreat while minimizing casualties on all sides. That required discipline and restraint that I did not expect from a species I had dismissed as warlike. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Thax raised a hand for silence. I propose a compromise. Allow humanity to maintain their super dreadnought fleet under specific conditions. First, these ships can only be deployed defensively or with Council authorization. Second, humanity must agree to technology sharing for defensive systems. Third, all such vessels must carry Council observers to ensure compliance. Admiral Park stepped forward. The Kryn commander's proposal is reasonable in spirit but problematic in practice. You're asking us to place our most advanced military assets under external control. That's something no sovereign nation in this chamber would accept for their own forces. Then what do you propose? A voice called out. It was Ambassador Quinthos, the bird-like representative who had once condemned humanity's weapons. Your ships terrify half the galaxy. Something must be done. Admiral Park's expression was calm but firm. We will accept Council observers aboard our vessels. We will agree to deploy only in defensive operations unless the Council specifically requests our intervention. But we will not surrender command authority. The Taguki and her sister ships remain under human control. And the technology sharing? Thax asked. We'll share defensive technology, shield improvements, damage control systems, medical innovations, but not weapons technology. I think we can all agree that spreading these weapons throughout the galaxy would defeat the entire purpose of this discussion. Scientist Ilara stood up in the observation section. High Arbiter, may I present my research findings? Please proceed. The insectoid scientist projected data onto the central display. I've been studying the diplomatic effects of the Taiguki's existence. In the 3 weeks since the Voidborn battle, we've seen 8 major border disputes resolved peacefully. 14 territorial negotiations have suddenly found compromise solutions. 3 potential conflicts have been completely avoided. She clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. The data suggests that the Taiguki is functioning exactly as humanity claimed it would, as a deterrent. Nobody wants to escalate conflicts when there's a possibility of human intervention. Fear of these weapons is preventing wars. Fear shouldn't be the foundation of peace, Quinthos argued. We should resolve conflicts through understanding, not intimidation. Ideally, yes, Ilara agreed. But practically, fear of consequences is what prevents most violence. Speed limits exist because people fear tickets. Laws exist because people fear punishment. The Taiguki is simply a galactic-scale version of the same principle. Ambassador Han seized the moment. The question before this council is not whether our ships are powerful. Everyone agrees they are. The question is whether that power serves galactic stability or threatens it. The evidence suggests stability. High Arbiter Velshan consulted with his advisors for several minutes. Finally, he spoke. The Council will vote on Commander Thax's proposal, with Admiral Park's modifications. Humanity may maintain their super dreadnought fleet under the following conditions. Council observers aboard each vessel. Deployment restricted to defensive operations or Council-authorized missions. And technology sharing for defensive systems only. All in favor? The vote took 20 minutes. When it was complete, the High Arbiter announced the results. 137 in favor. 63 opposed. The motion passes. Humanity's super dreadnought fleet is officially recognized under the stated conditions. Relief washed through the human delegation. They had won. Not everything they wanted, but enough to protect their security while satisfying the Council's concerns. But the session wasn't over. A representative from the hegemony stood up, a tall being with metallic skin. High Arbiter, what's to prevent other species from developing similar weapons? If humanity can build such ships, so can we. Are we to be banned from defending ourselves as effectively as they do? The chamber erupted in debate again. The arms race that everyone had feared was beginning. Multiple species were already attempting to reverse engineer human technology based on battlefield recordings. Some were developing their own superweapons using different approaches. Admiral Park raised her voice to be heard over the chaos. This is exactly what we were trying to avoid. An arms race benefits no one. Every species building weapons, like ours, increases the chance of catastrophic conflict. Then you should have thought of that before building your battleship, the hegemony. Representative shot back. High Arbiter Velshan called for order. The representative raises a valid concern. If humanity's weapons are permitted, consistency demands we allow others to develop equivalent capabilities. Unless anyone has a better solution. Ambassador Han stood. I have a proposal. The deterrence doctrine. Any civilization may develop superweapons, but only if they also develop peacetime applications for the same technology. Weapons of war must also be tools of peace. Explain, the High Arbiter requested. Dr. Choi stepped forward. He had been quiet until now, but this was his area of expertise. The Taiguki's mass drivers can move asteroids to prevent collisions with inhabited worlds. Our missile systems can map unexplored systems faster than any probe. The Stellar Lance can ignite fusion reactions to rescue stranded ships. Every weapon we built has a peaceful application. He pulled up technical diagrams. We're already developing these capabilities. Within 6 months, the Taiguki will spend as much time doing disaster relief and exploration as military patrols. Any species that wants to build superweapons should be required to do the same. Prove your technology serves life, not just destroys it. The proposal generated intense discussion. Some representatives loved it. Others thought it was impractical. But slowly, consensus began to form. The idea of turning weapons into tools appealed to civilizations that had spent thousands of years avoiding conflict. Commander Thax spoke again. I support this doctrine. The Kryn Empire has already begun developing our own superweapon, the Worldbreaker siege platform. If we're required to also develop peacetime uses for it, that forces us to think differently about military technology. I can live with that restriction. High Arbiter Velshan looked around the chamber. This is unprecedented. We would be fundamentally changing how galactic civilization approaches military technology. But perhaps that change is necessary. The old ways clearly weren't working if a single human ship could alter the strategic balance so dramatically. He called for another vote. This one took longer. Representatives consulted with their home governments. Military advisors argued with diplomats. Scientists debated with politicians. Finally, the vote was called. The deterrence doctrine is approved, Velshan announced. 171 in favor, 29 opposed. All superweapons must demonstrate peacetime applications. Any civilization that develops such weapons must also develop ways to use them constructively. The session finally ended hours later. As the delegates filed out, Daewon found himself standing with Commander Thax. The Kryn commander extended a hand in the human gesture he had learned. I misjudged your species, Captain. You're not warmongers. You're survivors who learned hard lessons and applied them well. Daewon shook his hand. We're just people trying not to repeat our mistakes. The galaxy gave us a chance to start over. We didn't want to waste it. The Taiguki terrified us, Thax admitted. It still does, if I'm being honest. But I'm beginning to understand why you built it. You were afraid too. Afraid of being destroyed by civilization stronger than you. The Taiguki is your answer to that fear. Yes. And now we have to prove we deserve to keep it. 5 years had passed since the Voidborn battle. The Taiguki drifted in orbit above a peaceful colony world, its weapons powered down but ready. The ship had changed. Its hull now bore the marks of its service, not from battle damage but from the work it had done. Scoring from asteroid deflections, heat patterns from rescue operations, the scars of a ship that had found purpose beyond war. Captain Jiwon Lee, now in command after Daewon's promotion to admiral, stood on the bridge reviewing mission reports. In 5 years, the Taiguki had not fired its weapons in combat once. But it had saved 14 colony worlds from asteroid impacts, rescued 47 stranded vessels, mapped 12 unexplored systems, and assisted in disaster relief operations on 9 different worlds. The galaxy had learned to see the battleship as something other than a threat. Children on colony worlds drew pictures of it. Scientists studied its technology. Diplomats pointed to it as proof that military power and peaceful service weren't contradictory goals. But peace never lasts forever. An emergency transmission interrupted the quiet morning shift. It was from the council station. High Arbiter Velshan's image appeared on the main screen, and Jiwon immediately knew something was seriously wrong. Captain Lee, we have a situation. The Liberation Front has seized control of New Harmony Colony. 2 million colonists are being held hostage. They're demanding independence from the joint Human Kryn administration, and they've threatened mass executions if their demands aren't met. Jiwon felt her stomach drop. New Harmony was one of the success stories of galactic cooperation. Humans and Kryn had jointly settled the world 15 years ago. It was supposed to be proof that different species could build something together. How much time do we have? She asked. 72 hours. The Liberation Front chose this target specifically to test the new galactic order. They want to see if the Council and humanity can work together under pressure, or if we'll tear ourselves apart arguing. Orders? Joint operation with the Kryn fleet. Commander Thax is already en route. You'll coordinate the liberation. But Captain, there's a complication. New Harmony is an urban environment. The hostages are scattered throughout the main city. Your primary weapons are too powerful for this situation. G1 understood immediately. The mass drivers, the missiles, the stellar lance. All of them were designed for ship-to-ship combat in open space. Using them in a city would cause exactly the kind of massacre they were trying to prevent. We'll find another way, she promised. The Tegukgi reached New Harmony 30 hours later. Commander Thax's fleet was already in position, surrounding the planet but not engaging. The Liberation Front had positioned hostages at key infrastructure points and threatened to destroy the colony's life support systems if anyone attempted a rescue. G1 opened a channel to Thax's flagship. The Kryn commander looked older than she remembered. The past 5 years had aged him. But his eyes were sharp and focused. Captain Lee, it's good to see you again, though I wish it were under better circumstances. Agreed, Commander. What's our tactical situation? Bad. The Liberation Front has approximately 3,000 armed fighters. They've fortified positions throughout the capital city. They have hostages at 15 different locations. A direct assault would result in massive civilian casualties. What about negotiation? They've refused all contact except to repeat their demands. Independence or death. They're fanatics, Captain. They chose this situation deliberately because they know we can't use overwhelming force. G1 studied the tactical display. The Liberation Front had made one critical mistake. They assumed the Tegukgi was only dangerous because of its weapons. They hadn't considered what else the ship could do. Commander Thax, I have an idea, but I'll need your ground forces ready to move on my signal. What are you planning? Something the Liberation Front won't expect. We're not going to attack them. We're going to find them. The Tegukgi descended into low orbit, positioning itself directly above the capital city. The Liberation Front watched nervously. They had anti-ship weapons, but nothing that could threaten a vessel of that size. Still, the sheer presence of the battleship hovering overhead was intimidating. G1 activated the ship's sensor arrays, the same systems designed to track enemy vessels across millions of kilometers of space. The same systems that could detect the heat signature of a single fighter craft hiding in an asteroid field. Now focused on a single city. Begin scanning, she ordered. I want location data on every armed combatant in that city. Cross-reference with civilian identification databases. Separate hostage takers from hostages. The Tegukgi's artificial intelligence went to work. Advanced sensors penetrated buildings, analyzing heat signatures, movement patterns, and weapon emissions. The ship's computers compared this data against colony records, identifying individuals and determining their likely status. Within 30 minutes, they had a complete tactical picture. Every Liberation Front fighter's position was mapped in real time. Every hostage location was identified. The computer even predicted patrol routes and shift changes based on movement patterns. G1 transmitted the data to Commander Thax. Commander, I'm sending you coordinates for surgical strikes. Your ground teams can hit every Liberation Front position simultaneously. They won't have time to react or harm hostages. This is incredible, Thax breathed, reviewing the data. You can see everything? Everything. And will provide real-time updates during the operation. Any Liberation Front fighter who moves will track them. Your teams will have perfect intelligence. The operation launched at dawn. Kryn Special Forces deployed to 15 locations simultaneously, guided by constant updates from the Tegukgi. They breached fortified positions while the Liberation Front was still trying to understand what was happening. Hostage takers were neutralized before they could react. Civilians were evacuated under the protection of armed escorts. The entire operation took 40 minutes. 3,000 Liberation Front fighters were captured or killed. 2 million hostages were freed. Total civilian casualties, 0. The city's infrastructure remained intact. Commander Thax opened a channel to the Tegukgi after the operation concluded. Captain Lee, that was the most precise military operation I've ever witnessed. You didn't fire a single shot. We didn't need to. The Tegukgi's greatest weapon isn't its firepower. It's its ability to remove uncertainty from combat. When you know exactly where everyone is, precisely when they'll be vulnerable, and how to strike without collateral damage. Overwhelming force becomes unnecessary. The Liberation Front chose New Harmony because they thought your weapons were useless in an urban environment. They were right about the weapons. They were wrong about the ship. The Taiguchi isn't just a weapons platform. It's an intelligence and coordination system that happens to have very large guns attached. News of the operation spread throughout the galaxy. The battleship that had terrified everyone with its firepower had just saved 2 million lives without firing a shot. Scientist Ilara published an analysis titled, "The Evolution of the Taiguchi, from Terror Weapon to Guardian Angel." Her conclusion was that humanity had succeeded in transforming their most feared weapon into one of the galaxy's most valuable assets. 3 months later, a ceremony was held at the Council Station. High Arbiter Velshan stood before a crowd of thousands, both in person and watching via hologram across the galaxy. "Today we dedicate this monument," he announced, gesturing to a massive sculpture behind him. It was a perfect-scale model of the KRS Taiguchi, rendered in crystal and metal. "This ship once terrified us. We called for it to be banned, dismantled, and forgotten. We were wrong," the crowd murmured. Velshan continued. "The Taiguchi represents humanity's greatest paradox. They built the most fearsome weapon this galaxy has seen in 20,000 years. And then they proved they didn't need to use it. They demonstrated that true strength lies not in the capacity for destruction, but in the wisdom to avoid it." Admiral Daewon Kim stood in the crowd, now retired from active service. Beside him was Commander Jiwon Lee, who had taken leave from the Taiguchi to attend the ceremony. They watched as the monument was unveiled, the crystal structure catching the light and refracting it into rainbow patterns. "We did it," Jiwon said quietly. "We built something terrifying and turned it into something good. For now," Daewon replied. "But that's the trick, isn't it? Every generation has to make that choice again. To use power responsibly or to abuse it. We made the right choice. Our successors will have to do the same." High Arbiter Velshan concluded his speech. "This monument will stand in the Hall of Historical Significance, a permanent reminder of the day we learned that the most dangerous weapon is not the one you use, but the one you prove you don't need to use. May all civilizations aspire to such wisdom." The ceremony ended with representatives from 200 species filing past the monument. Some bowed in respect, some left tokens of remembrance, some simply stood and stared, processing everything the ship represented. Ambassador Yoon Seo Han, now serving as Earth's chief diplomat to the Galactic Council, stood with Dr. Sang-Woo Choi. The engineer had transitioned to civilian work years ago, now leading research into peaceful applications of military technology. "Do you ever regret building it?" Han asked him. "Every day." The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was designed to intimidate. 200 species had their representatives seated in circular tiers that rose toward a domed ceiling, covered in holographic stars. At the center stood a single platform where those being judged would face the collective wisdom of the galaxy. Daewon stood on that platform, alone. His uniform was spotless, his posture military straight, but inside he felt the weight of every eye upon him. This wasn't a trial in the legal sense, they assured him. It was merely an inquiry. That distinction felt meaningless when you were surrounded by aliens who looked at you like you might explode at any moment. High Arbiter Velshan's voice echoed through the chamber. "Captain Kim, humanity stands accused of violating the spirit, if not the letter, of the Praxis Accords. These ancient laws govern acceptable conduct in warfare. Your vessel, the Taiguchi, represents a philosophy of warfare that this council finds deeply troubling. With respect, High Arbiter, we designed our ship according to human strategic doctrine. We made no attempt to deceive anyone about its capabilities. That is precisely the problem," a voice called out. It was Commander Thax standing in the Kryn Empire section. "Your doctrine assumes total war as the default state. You build weapons meant to annihilate, not defend." Daewon turned to face the Kryn commander. "We build weapons meant to prevent war from starting. There's a difference, is there?" Thax's scales darkened. "When I look at your ship, I don't see prevention. I see a threat. I see a species that thinks overwhelming violence is the answer to every question. Then you're not looking closely enough." Ambassador Yoon Seo Han stepped forward from the diplomatic gallery. The High Arbiter nodded permission for her to speak. "Ambassador Han, you may address the council." She walked to stand beside Daewon, her presence calm and measured. The Praxis Accords prohibit unnecessary cruelty and disproportionate force in the conduct of warfare. But they say nothing about the capacity for such force. We have not used these weapons. We have not threatened anyone with them. We simply demonstrated that we possess them. A distinction without meaning. An alien representative called out. The capacity for violence is itself a form of violence. Then every military in this chamber is guilty of the same crime. Ambassador Han replied smoothly. The difference is that our military is more effective. That shouldn't be a crime. It should be a model. The chamber erupted in protests and arguments. The High Arbiter raised his crystalline appendages, and silence gradually returned. We will hear from humanity's weapons designer. Dr. Sang-Woo Choi approached the platform. Dr. Choi walked to the center, looking far less comfortable than he had during the unveiling ceremony. Without his coffee and data tablets, he seemed smaller, more vulnerable. But when he spoke, his voice carried the confidence of someone who knew his mathematics were correct. You want to know why we built the Taguchi the way we did? He began. The answer is simple. We ran the numbers. In any conventional conflict with an established galactic power, humanity loses. We're outnumbered, outpositioned, and we lack the political alliances that older civilizations have built over millennia. So we changed the equation. Changed it how? The High Arbiter asked. We made conventional warfare pointless. If you attack us, you don't face a prolonged campaign. You face immediate, overwhelming retaliation that costs you your fleet, your strategic position, and possibly your government. Simple mathematics. The cost exceeds any possible benefit. Scientist Ilara stood up in the observation section. May I ask a question? The High Arbiter nodded. Dr. Choi, your missile systems use adaptive AI. Each missile learns from the failures of previous missiles. This suggests you anticipated destroying thousands of missiles just to improve the effectiveness of later ones. That's a terrifying level of resource commitment. Yes, Dr. Choi agreed. We call it the swarm doctrine. Quantity has a quality all its own. We learned that from history. What history teaches such lessons? She asked. Dr. Choi's expression grew somber. The history of species that fight themselves for 10,000 years. Every war we've ever fought taught us something about warfare. We learned from every mistake, every defeat, every victory. We refined the art of killing until we became very, very good at it. Good enough that we almost destroyed ourselves several times. The chamber fell silent. It was one thing to fear human weapons. It was another to understand that those weapons were born from millennia of self-destruction. Ambassador Quinthos, representative of the Peaceful Meridian Alliance, spoke up. His bird-like features were ruffled with agitation. You speak of your violent history as if it's something to be proud of. You've weaponized your own trauma. Daewon stepped forward. Not proud, prepared. We know what happens when civilization breaks down. We know what happens when diplomacy fails. We've lived it. Most of you haven't. Your species reached the stars without tearing yourselves apart first. That's admirable. But it also means you don't understand what we understand. And what do you understand that we don't? Quinthos challenged. That peace is temporary. That safety is an illusion. That the only guarantee of survival is the ability to make conflict too costly to initiate. Daewon's voice was quiet but firm. You call it pessimism. We call it realism. It's terrorism, Commander Thax growled. You've built a weapon so terrible that its mere existence is meant to control behavior. That's not defense. That's intimidation. Yes, Daewon agreed simply, and it works. Since we unveiled the Taguchi 3 weeks ago, how many border conflicts have been peacefully resolved? How many territorial disputes have suddenly found diplomatic solutions? The High Arbiter consulted his data display. 8 major disputes have been resolved, an unprecedented number for such a short time period. Because nobody wants humanity to intervene, Daewon said. Nobody wants to escalate a conflict when they know we might become involved. That's deterrence working exactly as intended. Or it's fear-poisoning diplomacy, Quinthos argued. You've made the galaxy afraid. Fear and caution look identical, Ambassador Han observed. The result is the same. Fewer conflicts, fewer deaths. Isn't that what we all want? The debate continued for hours. Representatives argued about philosophy, strategy, and the nature of power itself. Some defended humanity's right to self-defense. Others demanded the Taguchi be dismantled immediately. The council remained divided. Then, in the middle of a heated exchange about weapons treaties, an alarm sounded. Emergency alerts flashed across every display in the chamber. High Arbiter Velshon received a priority transmission, and his crystalline features somehow conveyed shock. "The Voidborn have returned," he announced. "They're attacking the Kryn border stations." Commander Thack stood abruptly, his scales flashing through colors rapidly. "How many ships?" 300 confirmed. "Possibly more. They're using weapons we've never seen before. Your defense fleet is—" "They're losing, Commander." The chamber descended into chaos. The Voidborn were a nightmare from galactic history, a hostile force that appeared without warning 300 years ago, devastated several systems, then vanished. No one had seen them since. Until now. High Arbiter Velshon looked directly at Daewon. The question was unspoken but clear. "If we suspend these proceedings, will humanity help?" Daewon didn't hesitate. "The Taguki can reach the combat zone in 6 hours. Give the order." Commander Thax looked like he wanted to refuse, but the numbers were clear. His fleet was dying. Pride wouldn't save them. "You would help us? After everything we've said here?" Daewon met the Kryn commander's eyes. "Deterrence only works if you're willing to use it when necessary. Besides, the Voidborn aren't a galactic power we're trying to intimidate. They're an enemy that needs to be stopped. That's exactly what the Taiguki was built for." The High Arbiter nodded slowly. "The Council authorizes human intervention." "Captain Kim, save our people." Daewon turned and strode toward the exit. As he left the chamber, he heard Ambassador Han speaking to the assembled representatives. "You wanted to know what humanity's weapons are truly capable of. You're about to find out. I suggest you pray we're as effective as we claim to be." Daewon activated his communicator as he ran toward the docking bay. "This is Captain Kim to the Taiguki. Prepare for immediate deployment. Combat operations authorized. Target, Voidborn fleet at Kryn border stations." Commander Jiwon Lee's voice came through, steady despite the urgency. "Understood, Captain. All systems ready. The crew is standing by. Good. We're about to prove whether deterrence is worth the fear it creates. Let's hope we can back up everything we've claimed." His shuttle launched moments later, accelerating toward the waiting battleship that hung in orbit like a sleeping predator. The galaxy was about to discover if humanity's terrible weapon was a guardian or a monster, or perhaps both.